Okay. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Erin. So welcome everyone to today's Knowledge Exchange panel. I'm Liz Pohland, I'm STC CEO, and I'm joined by Erin Galloway, who has been introducing herself already. She's STC's Director of Community Relations and Membership. And I'm joined by three distinguished panelists. Today's session is transitioning to Techcom, and we're going to focus on how to transition to this industry from another career path, and also how to transition your skill set. So joining me today are Tim Esposito, Liz Fraley, and Erin Redshaw. And as I mentioned earlier, we have two Liz's and two Erins today, so we'll try to keep everybody's name straight. But I'm going to read a few brief bios of our panelists so you know who's here. And Erin is going to prepare a poll for the attendees so we can see who's in the room, what backgrounds you have, and allow the panelists to see those responses and tailor their answers potentially to those. So Timothy Esposito is an STC fellow with over 20 years of technical communication experience. He is vice president-elect of STC's board of directors and is currently serving as secretary. And he's also the past president, oh, my lights just went out, past president of the STC Philadelphia Metro chapter. Liz Fraley is an STC associate fellow and founder of Single Sourcing Solutions. She's also a serial entrepreneur. She's founded 2 companies, sits on the boards of 3 nonprofits, and is constantly coming up with new ways to share knowledge in the technical communication and content industries. If you ask her, she'll say she loves creating connections with people and sharing knowledge. She's happiest when those around her are successful. And I know Liz personally, and I know that that's to be true. And finally, Erin Radshaw, he is with us today. He grew up in rain-soaked Oregon, but moved to sunny California soon after high school. He has been in many jobs over the years, but was a high school English teacher for 15 years. He transitioned into Techcom, and he's now working for Amazon as a technical programmer writer. So welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm really excited to hear from you, and I'm going to have Erin, if you don't mind, Erin Galloway, go ahead and start the poll so we can find out who's in the room. And while people are responding to that, why don't we get started with the panelists and have you all introduce yourselves and tell us when you got started in Techcom and how you transitioned. And Erin Redshaw, I will start with you.
Wow, okay, sure. Okay, so how I got started. Wow, okay. So for me, it was both wonderful and tragic. I've like I said, I have had a great many jobs over the years, but you know, after you get married and have kids, you decide you want to have something stable. So I was an English teacher, high school English teacher in Eastside San Jose for 15 years. I started to have some health issues, which made it impossible for me to supervise 150 students a day. So that's kind of, you know, the tragedy part. I had some health issues, kind of an autoimmune disease that made it to where I really couldn't keep up with all those kids all day long. So I had to get a different job. And essentially, you know, what I did is I just did what anybody would do, look at Google and say, okay, well, I have an English degree and what can I do with this? And what came up most consistently is the best job, really the best paying job, a job that had a lot less stress to it, would be technical writing, which was interesting because I had tried to get into technical writing before I became a teacher. And at the time, unless you had 9+ years of experience, they wouldn't even think about it. That was after the .com bust. And so there were all these tech people out there without jobs. So that's why everything was 9 years or more. Anyway, it was really an uphill battle to learn the technical skills, and we'll talk about all of that later. But I was very happy when, you know, eventually I got a temp job at Google, stayed there for a little over a year, and then got into something full-time regular at Amazon, and I love it, absolutely love it.
Thank you, Erin. That's a very interesting story. I also have a background in English. I got an English degree, and it was very obvious to me that English degree was not going to bring me in any income. I was certainly not going to be the next fiction writer of the world. So finding an actual paying position or a job that those skills transition to from English was an interesting task, but technical communication works. Okay, so just looking at the panel real quick, the poll, sorry. We have a lot of people who are new to STC this year, but also some people who are not members, so that's great to see. We have people who are interested in almost all of our offerings, career resources and networking. We have people who are students, recent graduates, people who are transitioning, which is not surprising given our topic, so that's good to know. And then there's some information for us about next panels and what you would like to see. So thank you very much for filling out the panel. That's very helpful. And I will let Erin stop sharing that and move on to Liz Fraley. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us how you got into Techcom?
So my story is also weird like Erin's. I actually got an undergraduate and graduate degree in English. I was a graduate student teaching that how to write a research paper class in 1992, which is when the web was born, more or less. And I had required my students to have computer online resources. There weren't many at the time. When I finished, there were not that many jobs for academics, and I wasn't sure I wanted to finish a PhD. I went back to school and got a computer science degree. At which point I worked as a computer scientist for several years doing high performance graphics, car drivers, and other things. I worked at the father of all computer graphics companies at one point. And then I was hired by Juniper Networks to bring them into a single sourcing environment. And it was because I had the combination of computer science and English that they hired me to do that. And that is what led me to the career I lead today.
Sorry, I can't find my mute button. Thank you, Liz. Yes, very similar trajectory. So Tim, how did you get involved with Techcom and transition? Where did you transition from?
Well, my undergrad degree was a double major in history and English. So of course that led me into a job working with computer software, because what are you going to do with history and English unless you're going to be a history and or English teacher or some sort of an editor. So in college, I had a job in the computer lab back at the dawn of the internet, close to around when Liz was teaching her class. And the people running the computer lab asked me to write instructions on how to use this new thing called email. And previously email, you had to sign in on a little green screen, and it was a direct connection to a Unix box in basically the next room. And then they installed Windows 3.1, and there was a new email program. So I wrote these instructions to be handed out in the lab, but they liked it so much they made copies of it and distributed it to all the professors and the classes in the school too. And I put a trademark on there, but they took that off, so I did not get credit to everyone that signed up for new computer science classes that year. So using that knowledge, I started a job after college at a company confusingly called SCT as opposed to STC, which has been messing me up for the past 20 some years. And I did technical support there, so phone support. And this was right before Y2K, and they had a Y2K solution. So their sales were going through the roof, and they had to get all these people out in the field to upgrade the software so everyone's legacy systems wouldn't explode in Y2K like all the computers didn't do. So they sent me out in the field for 6 months, and my coworker, she went to Paris for 6 months, and my other coworker went to the French Riviera, and I went to Louisville, Kentucky, and New Richmond, Wisconsin in January, which was not as glamorous as it may sound, but they were good experiences. And what I learned was not only was I good at helping doing the phone support, but I was developing training classes. So we had people coming into the office every month, and I developed a training class on our software. And then I was basically taking that on the road to these client sites and teaching them how to use the software there. And when I came back from all that, I realized, I don't want to deal with the stress of having to answer the phone and someone's angry and worried about something and totally stressing me out over someone else's problem. So a position opened up in the tech writing team, and I said, what, I think I'm a better fit there. I can solve these problems before they happen by writing better documentation. So I shifted to that role in 2000, and I've been doing tech writing ever since.
Thank you. So everybody has a really interesting story, and I think we'll find even in the chat that some of the people attending have interesting stories and how they got into Techcom or where they're transitioning from. we get a lot of questions about that in the STC office, is where do we come from? And Aaron Redshaw, I forgot to ask you, could you mention what you're doing with your local chapter as well, and the mentoring sessions you're doing on transitioning to TechCom?
Sure. Yeah. And that's really the main thing I'm doing. I used to be the treasurer for a while. I got out of that. And so, yeah, really my main interest is helping people. Exactly what we're talking about today. That's my main interest right now with STC, is helping people transition, because for me, I found it was harder than it should be. So I've been, I write a blog where I talk about that sort of thing, and some of the pain points and how you can try to get over those. And also I have once a month a meeting. It's a Zoom meeting, just 40 minutes long, because that's how much time you get free with Zoom, and that's how much energy I have on a Saturday, once a month. And it's about this exact thing. It's just like this, essentially. We get together and they just ask me questions about how do I get started. I usually have them give a little bit of like their background, where are they located, and what's one question they'd like, me to answer. And I do the best I can. I give them resources, point them in the right direction, maybe have very specific answers sometimes for them, but something to help them go to the next step in getting into technical communication. Are you putting links in there for this, or what? Where are
Yes.
we? Okay, awesome. Okay, and yeah, you want to reach out at the blog, yeah, and LinkedIn, absolutely. I go to that 5 days a week usually. So if anybody does have questions, I know Liz was saying that as well. If you have questions or anything, I love to answer people any question they have about this. But understand, I'll just say this now, understand I'm sort of new. I've been doing this for 3 years now, compared to Liz and Tim, who are seasoned experts. And also I'm in a specific location in the San Francisco Bay Area, which has different, jobs available, different, than everyone else. And I tend to focus on what I know the most, which is the docs as code style, not DITA, which is more Liz's thing. I know RoboHelp and that sort of thing is something Tim is really good at. I don't know that world. So, when it has to do with, using docs as code style, programming, how do you learn programming? How do you document APIs or sample code, things like that? That's kind of what I know best.
Thank you, Aaron. I think it's a great service you're providing, and it can be intimidating for people to find someone to talk to about how to transition in. And the fact that you're willing to do that is just a wonderful service you're providing other people. So let me get to one of my first questions, which is for all of you. What do you think? What other professions do you think transition well into TechCom, or what skill sets do you think transition well? And Liz Fraley, I'll start with you.
So I found that in my transition from English to computer science and basically back again, if you can write structured things well, you can write structured things well. Code is just a different writing and structure that you learn how to do. So I think that you kind of have to look at the greater scope of what it is you're doing and take the work out of it from a perspective target employer, wherever you want to go work. Take the work out of it so that they don't have to guess why what you were doing applies to what they need you to do, right? There are all kinds of skills and jobs and things that transition and are benefit. History I'm not surprised that Tim had history. I've run into any number of people who have history in their background and transition into TechCom. The same is true for people who do math or statistics. There are lots of TechCom is everywhere. There is a subject matter side to it, but there's also the skills in writing. When I went to well, I'll save that for a later question, but it's mostly your job to talk about how what you do turns into what they need you to do and what the job does, right? Tim could tell the story of, I was training people. I was really doing, this is what I was really doing. Doesn't matter what the job title was or what the job description says. This is what I was really doing. And making that translation, that's what TechCom writers do all the time. Here's the subject matter I'm trying to explain to people. Well, I'm making that translation from this to that so that they know what to do.
Thank you. Tim, since she's mentioned you a couple times, I'll move on to you.
Okay, so I would say anyone that has come from any sort of a profession where your job is to assist or help someone else is a good way in. And that could be a teacher like Aaron has, or a librarian, or a nurse, or all over the place. Everyone's job usually means that you have to interact with someone else on some level. The more public facing you are, maybe the better communication skills you may have. If you have a writing background of some sort, that can't hurt, because a lot of our communications are done through written or some sort of oral presentation, which you probably wrote first. So as Liz said, things need to be structured. You need to be able to understand what people want to do, simplify that, and explain it to people so they can follow those steps to do what they want to do. If you want, and TechCom is very broad. My background, as I said, is in computer science stuff, but maybe you're coming from a nursing background. You might be a great candidate to work in documentation for a pharmaceutical company or something like that, because the medical writing is a very specific form of technical communication that I would not feel comfortable jumping into right away. But if you have that background, go in that direction. If you're coming from a coding background, the API doc that Aaron mentioned, that's probably a good place too, because that's almost a blend of documentation and coding, so that people that are looking to integrate with software can understand the connection points. I do a little bit of that with my job. My job is I manage a team of writers internationally, but I also create documentation in the form of online help and DITA created manuals. DITA, which if you're not familiar with it, and it's been mentioned a few times because that's one of Liz Fraley's specialty areas, that is a very structured type of XML-based authoring. I've been using it for a couple of years. It's really neat because it makes you think about how you're structuring your content and how it will, without having to worry about how it visually appears, because that's another aspect. It gets transformed into HTML or PDF, but when you're creating the content, you don't need to worry about that as much. So if you're good with coding and XML, that's one thing that you can use as well. So yeah, so basically organization, ability to simplify complex ideas, and to understand what people are trying to do when you write stuff, because you can write all the instructions you want, but if that's not what people are really looking for, it's not going to help them.
Thanks, Tim. And I think you've pointed out an important point, which is TechCom is in every industry. And regardless of what industry you're coming from, as long as you have some of the skill sets that you guys are mentioning, you can stay in those industries most likely, even if you've been doing something totally different.
Yeah.
Because every single industry, even one of the groups that I've learned about recently, because the Washington, DC area is the association headquarters of the world, and there are more associations here than anywhere else. There's an association for people who write the instructions for games, for example. So, you could really be coming from any industry that interests you and find a TechCom job. So Aaron, I will also pass the question to you. What professions and what skill sets do you think transition well?
Be unmuted, shouldn't I? So first of all, I wanted to ping off of what Tim was talking about DITA and such, just because I did write a blog about this. I haven't blogged a ton, but I have some useful ones maybe. And so I'll just paste that in here, and it specifically talks about DITA as well as Docs as code and some other, like, what kinds of technical writing jobs are out there. I don't know all of them well. I know some about DITA because I actually started training myself on that when I was trying to get a job, and then I moved towards the Docs as code approach, and that's what I ended up getting a job in. But anyway, if you want to know more about it, I have it on that blog. Okay, what kinds of how can you transition and from what kinds of jobs? First of all, I have to say, when I ran into this question, I thought there's really no right answer to this, because there's no job that you can't transition from into technical writing. And yes, some of them, maybe you're doing things that are already closer to technical writing. So for instance, as a teacher, having to write, lesson plans regularly and things like that, that helped. When I used to do technical support many years ago, I'm helping customers, giving them instructions verbally, oftentimes by email. Yeah, that lends itself well. But really, the larger question is, what do I need to do to get into technical writing if you're interested? And first of all, you have to find out if it's something you're interested in. In other words, what's the job like? And so I would find people that are technical writers. And yeah, you can do it on LinkedIn through, contacting us. That's why I joined STC, was to meet people and ask questions and find out what the job was like. So, so first you want to find out, am I interested in this thing enough to move on and get to know people who do it, find out what the job is like a little bit. But it's really two things. It's writing and a real interest in technology. It's those two things. And you have to have either be fairly good at one or the other or both, or be willing or want to learn one or the other or both. So part of my story is I wasn't, just like everyone starting out, I wasn't good at anything. Even before I was an English teacher, I remember in college, my English professor said, you know what, you could, it would be helpful to you if you just had an extra year of college just to work on your writing. That's how bad my writing was. And he was right. And, because I didn't come from an educated background. I was the only person, 4 kids. I was the only one in my family who ever went to college and graduated. And it was just because I wanted to make more money and have a better life. And I'd had some horrible, horrible jobs. I have to give a quick segue here too, because one of the things that hasn't been brought up, but it is pretty important, is most jobs that I know of for technical writing require you have some kind of degree in anything. It's not always the case. There are jobs out there that don't require that, but the majority of them require some kind of college degree. So you would probably want to start there. And if you don't, that would be, something you'd have to overcome, or maybe you'd want to go to college to do that. If your writing is just like sort of okay, you may want to take some classes. If it's the tech side, which a lot of times it's the tech side that people need to work on, well, I have a lot of blogs that specifically focus on that, because for me, I had to learn how to program. I had to learn, how to use Git. I had to learn a lot of tools. But you can do that. And fortunately for the technology side, most of that you can do online. You can take classes, but you could do it online. Quick, I'm scanning ahead here. Yeah, the other thing I would say is, you may, well, actually, this is going to come up later, so I'm not going to go there yet. I just realized there's a question coming up that'll cover this. But yeah, you have to have an interest and either be good in one or both of these subjects, writing or technology, or be really willing to work hard to become good.
Right. I think you've really boiled it down to the essentials, and I think that's great. I agree with you about the degrees. I've seen that a lot in job postings. I think there is a way to hobble something together that's not a degree, potentially, to still get interest. And I know STC publishes what's called the salary database, which is a document that every year looks at the Bureau of Labor Statistics data about the field. And the great news is that technical communication is one of the fields. They just look at technical writing, but we like to talk about technical communication as a wider field, is one of the fields that in the next 20 years is going to continue to grow, salaries, positions, et cetera. So that's the projection. So related to that, what do you all feel are the benefits of transitioning to TechCom? I think, Aaron, you mentioned higher pay, potentially more flexibility, things like that. What can you identify that you think would be a benefit from transitioning potentially from another area into TechCom? And Tim, I'll start with you this time.
Well, I alluded to this earlier, but when I was in my first job and I was doing phone support, I'd get a call at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. People are all angry. And I say, okay, I'll put in a ticket. And then they'd call me at 7:30 the next morning wanting to know why the ticket hadn't been resolved yet. Meanwhile, the people to fix it hadn't come in yet. But I was the one who was getting yelled at. And it was very stressful. And I burned out of that after a couple of years. And I thought, well, if stuff is documented better, you're getting behind the system or maybe ahead of it. So that way you can help prevent this kind of thing. So in my mind, one of the benefits are you don't have as stressful confrontational situations as you do in that job role, because you're helping to train people and educate them ahead of time, providing them with easily accessible content that they can search and find and use on their own speed rather than calling and demanding it being pushed to them. So it's more proactive than reactive, which, like I said, I think that's less stressful. And a little bit more collaborative because you get to work with, in my case, for software, the developers. Okay, they're creating a new screen. Well, they put a button over here. Well, maybe, the way the user wants it, the button should really be over there, or the field should be called something else other than, whatever random mumbo jumbo technical ID that they put in there, because that's what the database row was called. Okay, let's polish up this user interface because we have that insight. How do the customers use this? How do they want to do that? So again, it's more the benefit of being proactive on something and heading things off rather than trying to scramble afterwards and pick up the pieces. So I think just for keeping your own sanity, that's a great place to be.
Yeah, I like to think of technical communicator folks as sort of the glue between different parts of the product. The subject matter experts, the marketing team. This is the person who needs to know all that information and work kind of in the middle. And yeah, keeping your sanity is a major point. So Liz, how about you? How do you answer?
I think I lost track of specifically what our question is, but I will follow up on both of those. So a bunch of years ago, I went to the American Medical Writers Conference just to see who they are. And they broke down into kind of two categories. There were scientists, ex-doctors, ex-nurses. And then there were the writers and the journalists. So and each side was trying to learn the other side, right? So you can come into technical writing or technical communications from pretty much anywhere, because there is that subject matter expertise. Aaron was talking about that as you need to know the tech. Well, yeah, if you're going to do software doc writing, and if you're going to do API doc writing especially, you need to know the stuff that is part of that subject matter expertise. But there's also a huge, government writing industry where most of the writers are ex-military guys who learned to write but knew the material. They knew how to break the engines down or how to repair this or that. And so they're the ones now writing the technical content to help other people learn how to do that, right? So really TechCom is everywhere. Someone wrote the instructions on the roast I bought at the supermarket, and that's how I learned to cook the roast, quite frankly. There are technical writers at Burger King. There are process writers. There's writers everywhere. So it's not, but the writing we cannot downplay the necessity of knowing how to write. And Aaron's completely right about that. You have to be wanting to write and to improve your writing and to think about audience and context and all the things that writers care about. But if you're coming to it strictly from a subject matter expertise perspective, that's going to get you through a lot of doors too. So, I don't know if that answers the question, but I think it's worth saying that there's a lot of doors.
There are, and you're also not operating in a silo. You've got all these
That's
people
right.
around you that are supporting you, the subject matter expert potentially, or the tech expert or whatever, the marketing.
Yeah.
So I think there's a misunderstanding about TechCom that people are sitting at their desks just by themselves writing this documentation, but that's not the case anymore. It's very much collaborative with all the other teams that are related to whatever product or instruction you're trying to get out. So Erin, I'll pass it to you, and I'm going to remind you guys, the question was about the benefits of TechCom as a field. I think there are a lot of ways that people transition to TechCom, and if you look at the salary database, there are a lot of things that TechCom offers: higher pay, better benefits, flexibility to work from anywhere, stuff like that, that maybe you could highlight, Erin, because I know you said you moved into this field for exactly that reason.
Yes, I sorry to do this to you, but I want to finish Liz's thought. I want to add one thing to hers before I move on to this, but it'll be a short one. And it's only this. What she says is absolutely right in that, first of all, I only know the software kind of side of it. And I'm told there's a lot in medical, there's so many different areas. And one of the things I remember I blogged about this, the knowing the subject, at least in our area, it's very much held at a higher esteem than your ability to write. So if you have worked in the industry, like Liz was talking about, and then you're like, oh, I want to get into the writing, oftentimes those people, more than anything else, their people are desperate for someone who's even willing to write, who has that experience.
Yes.
So yes, you may have to practice your writing, but if you have some kind of knowledge, it's kind of specialty knowledge, that really can get you in the door. And now I'll actually answer the question. Yes, so I remember when I was at Google as a temp, I worked with, there was one person already there who was a regular full-time Google employee. And there was another temp who came in and worked with us. Both of them, and also this was my story, all of us had physical issues. So yes, so all three of us had some real physical setbacks in our life. And one of the reasons why we transitioned was because the stress level as a technical writer is less than a lot of other jobs. Now, you can have technical writing jobs that can be pretty stressful, but so far, even at the worst, it doesn't in any way compare to what I was doing as a teacher, and a number of other jobs I've had. So stress level is one, I would say, for sure. And if that's a big deal for me, my health really, I started to recover in lots of ways just because of that change of jobs. So it's less physically, emotionally draining. That's one thing. It's in very high demand. That's one thing. A lot of people, especially if you have that specialized knowledge, it's in very high demand. So once you get in, which is not necessarily easy, but once you get started, you know, on my LinkedIn, every week, and my email every week, I have to turn down people who ask me if I want to work for them. You know, that didn't happen before. So it's in high demand. You tend not to be micromanaged, not universal, but you tend to be able to pretty much go at your pace, get things done, and people are just happy to have it done. Not, again, you know, some places maybe, you know, there might be somebody micromanaging you if you're on a big team or something of tech writers, but there are a lot of kind of working on their own tech writers, or maybe it's just the two of you or something, tend not to be micromanaged so much. The pay is good. It really is good. And for somebody with an English degree, which I have, there's probably nothing I could do that would pay as high as this. I'll tell you, just as an example, okay, California is a very expensive place to afford housing. As a teacher, I was at the very top of the salary grade. After 15 years, I was not going to ever make any more money hardly than where I was. But there was no hope of me ever purchasing a house in California. When I started working in Amazon, within like 6 months, we bought a house. And I was new, right? I was a new technical writer. So that is a big help. A lot more flexible, and a lot of, especially right now, a lot of work from home, right? Remote jobs weren't available before, but right now they are just desperate for human beings who are willing to do this job from anywhere. So that's really nice. Yeah, so, and I actually enjoy the work. So if you like tech stuff, if you kind of like our, I mean, I like reading science fiction, all that stuff, and I get to work with technology that's kind of like trying to make these things happen that would be science fiction. So to me, it's totally cool. I mean, I get to be, again, this is kind of my side of things. It would be different if I was doing medical or whatever, but I like nerd culture, geek culture, and it's like awesome. I just love these things. So I get to hang with, developers, programmers, and see their world a little bit, and it's a lot of fun.
Thank you, Aaron. I think you're not alone in that arena. I think a lot of us like that stuff. So a lot of you've already addressed this a little bit, but let me go to my next question, which is, what advice can you provide people who maybe are just starting to transition, or what should they do first to try to get involved? Is it updating a resume? Is it taking a course? Aaron, you mentioned they might want to get a degree. Liz, I'll start with you. What do you think people need to do right away if they want to get into TechCom?
I'm not sure what the first thing is, other than really, honestly, this is one of the places where STC excels. Brand new technical writers who are trying to transition, who are just now starting in that career path, this is one of the best places to be. There are people who will help you. You can approach any member and say, hey, what's it like to do what you're doing? Or what is it like to work at your company? Or what do you do every day? Or what do you like about it? And they will talk to you. Honest to gosh, TechCom people are some of the nicest people around. And it's part of the nature, right? We like to help people. We want them to get what they need and be successful at what they're trying to do. So honestly, I would say STC is one of those things. Maybe you can get a mentor or start asking questions, do some informational interviews. I see too that there are some other than the panelists, some senior people on the call here who are well known for being community enablers, for one way to put it. And so take it. You can take classes online, like Aaron says. You can try a tech type of course. You could take Git, or you could learn some API stuff, or you could learn some manufacturing stuff, or you could learn some military stuff. You can pick the subject matter you're interested in, or a tech that you're interested in, or improve your writing. Get a certificate from a local university. There's a lot of paths, but I'm going to stick with STC because STC helps let you know about all of those paths. Honestly, they have courses that they run all the time for brand new people. Learn how to edit, learn how to write, learn how to do this. So
that's right. And we actually have someone in the room today. Leah Gurin is here. She teaches our TechCom Fundamentals Bootcamp, and it's super popular. It fills every time we offer it, because that's how many people are trying to get that essential knowledge. So I appreciate you mentioning STC, of course. I think we're doing a really—
and she's super good at it. Let me just point out, Leah's really super good at it.
Amazing. That's why we kept her around for so long, and she's our number one instructor. So, and I'm sure she's willing to talk to individuals in chat if they have questions for her about her course. But I think that, mentioning STC is good. I think STC is doing a much better job than we have maybe in the past in welcoming some of those new individuals. We have these panels, but we also have some new member meetups we do every month too, just to let new people into the field come in and say, kind of like what Aaron's doing with this chapter, come in and say, hey, here's what I'm doing. I need to talk to some other people about it. It's very casual. That kind of introductory session can really help you find somebody that, as Liz mentioned, could maybe be a mentor. So thank you for mentioning that. Tim, how about you? What do you think people need to do right away?
I would say one of the greatest tools that you can have is networking and volunteering. I'm coming from a community leader standpoint. I was the president of the Philadelphia Metro chapter. And before that, I was the vice president. Before that, I was the treasurer. And before that, I was the webmaster. And I started all this other stuff. So you get, if you go out and even if you're not a member of STC, you can still reach out to the various communities and become interested in what they do. They often offer things, webinars, sessions, activities. You don't have to be a member to be participating. Sometimes they give you a discount if you're a member, depending on the structure of it. But I would say if you become an STC member, it opens the doors to joining all of these communities, but you can participate regardless. STC has a very active Slack workspace that we started up about a year and a half ago. And anyone can join that. You can reach out in there and find out, ask all those questions. Like Liz said, where can you go to ask and find these people? So you can find them there online in that interchange, or volunteer with a community. This is how you get leadership skills. This is how you get experience. You want to get further? Okay, maybe they need a webmaster and you have some web skills. Well, you're going to learn how that community works. You're going to learn how to share things online in a format that benefits everyone in the community. And then you can roll that out into your job. Hey, okay, I can do this. I know WordPress. I know how to structure things. I know how to do these other skills that I learned through working with STC volunteers. So I would say I got elected vice president this year, and this is after I had the sucker tattoo removed off my forehead from doing all the volunteerism for the past decade or so. But yeah, it'll help you get ahead in your career too, because my boss noticed that I'm doing all this stuff and I'm doing international presentations and I'm on a board of directors. And, this is a feather in his cap that he's got someone that's doing that kind of thing. So get out there and get involved. It's like travel back in time to when you were in university. The more you got involved with, the more experiences you got out of it. Just don't go to class, go to all the activities, meet people, integrate, learn new things outside of your current zone of comfort. Push the envelope and gain more experiences that way.
Yep, that's a great advice. Thank you, Tim. Aaron, how about you? What do you think people need to do right away if they want to get into this?
Sure. My answer may be long enough that you may not want to invite me for the next question, because I'm going to be combining some of the answers maybe anyway, it's kind of a lot. First of all, you already mentioned, yes, a 4-year degree, probably you ought to have that. If you don't, probably. Next, some of you already mentioned this, and I did earlier, you want to connect with other tech writers to find out, do you actually want to do this? That's the first thing. Do you want to? If you decide, yes, I want to, then you have to decide okay, what kind of technical writing would I want to do? And, first of all, do you have expertise already in an area that may totally lend itself to technical writing? That's awesome if you do. That really helps. Or is there an area you're really interested in that you want to get into? And besides only interest, I'm not of the mind that interest is everything. Okay, people have this, a little bit of a rant here. People have this idea that, if I'm interested in it, then the money will come to me. Well, that's not necessarily true. There are areas of tech writing that pay much better than other areas. The reason why I got into software technical writing is because it's on the highest end of the spectrum for that. And I do have an interest, but I really had to learn a lot. So, what kind of technical writing? As I said, I have a blog that specifically talks about that to some extent. Once you kind of have that figured out, and really you're going to be looking at a lot of mostly job descriptions to see what's out there. So do that. Go to whatever, Indeed or whatever, and just look at job descriptions in your area of tech writing and find out what's out there. And then once you decide what you're interested in, you will want to put together, this is the way I did it anyway, put together probably a spreadsheet or something that shows, okay, well, these are the hits I came up with the most often asked for required skills to get this job that I'm interested in. And, I actually created, let me see, I can actually give it to you if you want, but I actually created a worksheet, or actually it's a Google sheet I'll throw it in there, or maybe nobody cares, but I'll throw it in there anyway. It's actually publicly available, so anybody can look at it. But it deals specifically with the kind that I do. But I just wrote down, these are the skills that keep coming up, like XML, Agile, Jira, FrameMaker, Data, and this is how many hits I came up with, jobs that came up that had these in them in my area. And then since I decided, well, okay, maybe I'm not going to do, maybe, okay, in my case, I'm doing docs as code. So I would cross off, I'm not doing XML, I'm not doing Data, I'm not doing FrameMaker, because I was doing my style, the docs as code. But if I decided I want to do Data writing, I like that, then I would totally learn FrameMaker. By the way, you can, at least when I did this, you could download a trial copy, train yourself on it, learn enough so that you can create something. In my case, I wrote how to build a computer, because I had learned that in my past, and put it on an online portfolio. And then add that skill to your resume and your LinkedIn, and then go to the next skill on that list and do the next thing. Learn it. Some things you can learn quickly, like for instance, in my line of work, you have to learn Markdown. You can learn it in an afternoon. It's that easy. You can write something then in GitHub or whatever in Markdown, put a link on your website, whatever, add that to your list on your resume, on LinkedIn, go to the next skill. So I would do that. So I would do 3 things simultaneously, really, when I was trying to get a job. I would apply for jobs. Every day I saw something come up, I would apply for it. I would learn a skill. So I'd spend most of my day, I was fortunate in that I wasn't doing another job. I was out of work. I had to try to find another job. So, 6 hours a day I was doing this. So for an hour or 2, I was applying for jobs. For about 4 or 5 hours a day, I was training myself in something on the spreadsheet that I didn't know before. And once I got a good understanding of it, I remember Data. I have a really good site that talks about how to learn Data. There's a really good site. Actually, okay, I'll throw this one out there too. I have this. This is just a Google Doc as well, but I put lots of resources on here for how to learn whatever. You want to learn how to code, you want to learn Data, you want to learn whatever. I have lots of things that are useful there. So I went through, there's a Data course online, very good, it's free. I think it took me a couple of weeks, and then you start working with it. And in this case, I did something with FrameMaker and published something and put it on my website. Let's see, where am I? I need to look at my notes again. Okay, so you learn the technology, you prove you've learned it, you add the skill, prove it by putting on an online portfolio of some sort. I did a talk about that again on my website. You can see, I can't remember if that's the one I had a recording on. I think it is. But anyway, on my website, you can see that. And then put that skill on your LinkedIn and, on your resume, keep that updated. Okay, my last part, because I'm kind of doing a long one here. I'm going to answer somebody's question already, because someone was asking. So the question is essentially, hey, I have this already knowledge of computer and electrical and all this, but I'm still having a hard time finding the job with no experience. And so that's why one of the first blogs I ever wrote had to do with that experience is king. Like, nobody cares about anything hardly until you have experience. One of the most difficult things that I went through was going through this series of interviews. First of all, I was happy to get any interview because nobody was interested. But no matter how many skills I had on my resume and such, mostly they just wanted to see experience. And so I finally got together with somebody. I actually knew this person from a previous job. Interviewed. I went through several interviews, phone interview, great. Got to meet with the technical writers there. They loved me. I mean, it seemed like everything was going in my way. They had said they just got a new boss, so they didn't know him too well at the time. Finally got to the last interview with the boss after the technical writers totally said we should hire this guy. Got to the last guy, and he didn't even look at my resume. He didn't even know anything about me and didn't seem to care. He didn't look at my portfolio. He didn't look at my resume. He only asked one question. He said, so how many years of full-time technical writing experience do you have? That's the only question he asked. I said, well, I don't. I said, yeah, that was over. The interview was over. So it's really hard unless you can get some experience. I just started writing a series of blogs. There are going to be 3 of them just about how to overcome this thing of not having experience. And I've only written one of the 3-part series so far. But the part, and this is what kind of maybe goes into some of the future questions. One part is, hey, there's a possibility of some schools or certificates have as part of their curriculum either an internship, or maybe they have inroads into actually getting you your first job. I wouldn't go anywhere unless they have that if you're trying to get in, because I have run into people who have the degree in technical writing and they can't get a job. So that doesn't guarantee it either. You have to have some way in. And at that, I need to stop talking because I'm going to run out of time. So
thanks, Aaron. You've mentioned so many important things, and Liz, I'm going to come to you just a second, but I want to point out that you mentioned educational opportunities, that there are ways to get experience that may not be the traditional routes. One of them is on our Slack channel, we have a volunteering section, and a lot of companies are actually looking for somebody to come in and help them with a real project. And even if it's not for pay, or it's just a way for you to get experience, it's a great way to show somebody that you actually have done TechCom, even if it's not in an official position. Of course, STC also started a certification program for this exact reason, to close the gap between the individuals who may not have a degree and are looking at a later stage to try to get into TechCom, or want to show I can do all this stuff over here, but I want to prove I can write. I want to prove that I'm interested in TechCom. So I think you've hit on both of those things. And I know Liz Fraley wants to say something else about this as well. So Liz, I'll pass it to you.
It came to mind as I was listening to Aaron and to Tim. So one of the issues is, how do you have experience without getting the job? And a bunch of years ago, I saw a presentation by Mary Anthony, who works for Docker. And then we gave a presentation, or had Gail Naylor from the East Bay chapter do a presentation. She transitioned from working as an aerospace engineer into TechCom, and her first job was Facebook. Part of the way she was able to do this, and it had to do with Mary Anthony's advice, is if you want to work for a company where open source is part of their culture and part of what they do, and part of their, right, Facebook has a bunch of open source stuff that they're based on. If you volunteer for an open source project and work on it, you are a working technical writer. And the experience, the subject matter expertise of working in an open source community, you're getting the culture of open source communities, and that makes you a subject matter expert in that, and it's easier to work at an open source company. Mary Anthony actually said, if you're not a part of an open source community, you won't work here, right? We need to know you know it, right? So that's a part of it. And then, so you can volunteer for any one of those. And I'll tell you, most open source projects have non-native English speakers working as engineers on those programs. They are delighted and happy and super thrilled that someone will come and take what they've started, not as expert English writers, and turn it into good documentation. So not only are you getting, portfolio, real project experience, but you're doing it in a very supportive and grateful environment, right? They will help you. They will volunteer to read and do reviews, because they want their stuff to be good. So you can go to one of those. Those can be hard. Last year, I also sit on the board of TC Camp. It's a nonprofit organization for technical writing. we did an interview with Erin Carlson, who works in West Virginia, and she discovered yet a new place for you to get portfolio and actual experience that none of us had really considered before. There are tons of small community efforts wherever you are that need a technical writer to help them, right? Even if it's like, so in her case, she was talking to people who own land in West Virginia, and the oil company comes through and puts pipe in their land. And then the owner who has a problem is left with, well, what do I do? So a bunch of community organizations rose up in that environment. Not on one of them has a website. Not on one of them has any instructions for the people who live locally on how to deal with big corporate interests. And she uncovered this community resource where like you can go there and provide a tremendous benefit to community organizations that need it. They don't even know they need a technical writer, but you can go to them and say, hey, we can improve your visibility in the community. We can improve your, the entire community if we write it this way or we do that way, right? It's definitely a place to go. So, join an open source program. I put Gail's session in the chat window. You can listen to Erin Carlson talk about her research going on right there. But it's meaningful opportunities for technical communications work to be doing community engagement and provide real benefit at a community level. And then, put up the website, you start writing their emails, you write their brochures. That's a whole lot of stuff that your name is on and you can use in your portfolio. And if it matches a passion of yours as well, then you're following your passion as well. So that the last one I'm going to add is Erin talked about internships. And that's a real thing. So TC Camp this last semester had something like 25 interns working. Anybody who knows me and knows Janice knows that those interns were working. They were not just coasting through class. And they have published articles on TC Camp website that go to their byline that they can use from this point forward. So don't let the volunteer stuff get away. Tim is 100% on that. Not only do volunteers give you a network, but they can absolutely give you a portfolio and experience that will lead to, I was a full-time technical writer as a volunteer job.
Yeah, thanks, Liz, for mentioning that. We've had prior panels on both of those topics, on volunteering and on updating your resume or finding jobs when you may not already have one. So I recommend everybody go to our YouTube channel. All of the panels that we've had in the past are there. They're open. You can watch any of them and learn more. Obviously, this topic has been hugely popular, and I picked the right panelist because I feel like we could go another hour on this, and we may have to do another one and talk some more because you've been so informative. I can't thank you enough for everything you've offered today. If anybody has anything last they want to say, I'll let you do that. I know we are running a little bit over, but I also appreciate all the resources that you guys are posting in the chat. That is super helpful and a nice little added surprise. So I know Erin has some parting slides for us, but is there anything anybody else wants to add or that I didn't get to that you wanted to say today, panelists?
I have one last thing. It's a direct example of what we just talked about. There was a woman I used to play in a community band, and she was in the section with me, and she went back to school and got a degree in technical communication, and she was looking for a job, and she didn't have the industry experience. And I said, wow, the Philadelphia chapter could use some volunteers. So she became their publicity person. She wrote blog posts, she advertised their events. She got a job because she had that background then. It was something that was visible and in the community. So it opens doors. The more people you know, the more doors open, and the more work that you do as a volunteer, the more visible you are to hiring managers.
That's great. Thank you. And Aaron Redshaw, I also, when you were talking about your spreadsheet and all the different job tasks in a current position, a few years ago in our journal, Technical Communication, there were some researchers who went out and actually collected a bunch of job descriptions and wrote some articles about what the most common skill sets and needs were for those jobs. So I'd be curious if that's still relevant today, or if jobs have changed enough, or if those articles are still following the trends. But we have done some research on that. So thank you all. I'm going to pass it back to Aaron Galilee to give some final slides and some last minute details, but this has been a great panel and I can't thank you enough for being here today and sharing all of your expertise and advice. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Liz. Just some of the final notes. I just wanted to include the contact information for the STC staff, Liz and myself. If you want to reach out, if you didn't think of a question or you had thoughts later today, you're welcome to reach out and link to us either by LinkedIn or through email at the STC office. This is also the links for the LinkedIn profiles for all of our panelists. Please feel free to connect to them here or also within our STC Slack workspace. There is a knowledge exchange channel that you can connect to that will allow you to ask questions just about the session there. And also there's ways that you can connect to many of our other members, as they've stated earlier in the program, all of our panelists that our membership is our best membership benefit that we can offer you. And our community is warm and they're eager to help in any way that they can. So please connect with us there.